Hello, and welcome to episode 10 of the Dumb Money Show. We've hit a huge milestone for us. We've been consistent and we've stayed on the ball. So, what are we talking about today, Ali?
Today, as you said, it is our 10th episode. We are very blessed and very excited to have our first finance professional on the show, Samantha Zhou. Just quickly before I give the ball to Samantha, she graduated from our university, the London Institute of Banking and Finance, in 2020, studying finance, investment and risk. She is currently a portfolio and risk analytics specialist at Bloomberg. Brief overview of her role, which we'll get into more later on in the episode as well. She delivers strategic solutions to global asset managers and sell-side players using Bloomberg's suite of solutions and models. With a background in investment risk and client services, she has grasped the technicals and can convey insights to a group of risk managers and credit managers, all the way through to retail investors. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Samantha. Samantha, how are you?
I'm well, very well. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, 100% for our milestone episode
Yeah.
as well. Just briefly, I'm going to touch on how we met. So you did a two-part event at our university, one at the campus and then one at Bloomberg's offices as well, which was amazing. And that was like an insight into portfolio management and asset management, which was great. And then we had kind of just started the podcast then, and we thought, you know what, let's take a shot in the dark.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, and you
that's
were very
exactly-
welcoming, and that's just led us to here.
So lovely, yeah.
100%.
And we are.
Do you want to just quickly intro the topic? So what we're going to actually talk about today. So we're going to touch on your educational background slightly, just briefly, and then we'll swiftly move on to your current field, your current role, your career after university, why you chose asset management, and the various nuances about your current role as well. Be prepared for some stupid questions from us. But yeah, I think let's jump straight in to the educational background.
Yeah.
So just briefly, can you give us like a quick overview of kind of your education from A levels onwards? Did your A level choices reflect your degree, and that sort of stuff?
Yeah, of course. So A levels was a little bit of a non-traditional path for me, but I went in with the traditional options. So I went with finance, mathematics, economics, and business. And the finance A level was indeed hosted by our university, LIBF. However, the other three A levels were hosted by my college at the time. I didn't end up getting the degree results I didn't end up getting the grade results that I was expecting towards the degree I was looking for. So, just for context, I actually was a massive maths nerd. I still am to today. At the time, I had these lofty expectations of completing a master's in mathematics. Because my grades weren't reflective of my capacity for that, I actually switched over and did BTech in business and kept the finance A level with it. So then that stirred on some interest in, okay, I can do these courses, but where is it going to take me career wise? Because I don't want to make it aimless or purposeless. That was always my mentality, just coming from an African background. It's always a focus on what are you doing with your life? What's the next step? So then I got interested in business or finance. And I came across LIBF through the A level course, of course, and began discussions with them. I actually indeed finished my A level with the BTEC with offers from Durham City and LIBF. But what actually led to my choice in LIBF was indeed the focus on your next path and your career. And I liked, it sounds a bit random, but I liked the fact that there was no accounting module because I know I did not enjoy accounting whatsoever. Doing T-books and whatnot wasn't for me, even though my dad was a bit surprised by that. So yeah, that's what drove me to then do the finance investment and risk degree at LIBF.
I mean, it's quite interesting that you mentioned that you are a maths nerd, but yet, you didn't receive the results you were looking forward to, so you switched. I think that's quite important that if you know your weaknesses, right? Even though you enjoy it, you need to do something that you're good at, right? I mean, that's interesting. But knowing what you do now, would you change your A levels and how? If so, or would you stick, or what would you do?
To be fair, like I probably wouldn't have changed my A levels. I was very happy with my choices. Though my results do reflect, I realized from my pivot in the course and just how I kind of managed in terms of the exams. I'm not an exam person. Assignments are my thing. That's why the BTEC was beautiful for me. Whereas doing the other courses and doing the examination, I didn't perform well in exam pressure. However, my maths knowledge and such actually stood up higher than the rest of the students that I was studying the course with. So in the end, I just thought, you know what? Even though I might not be able to perform in exams, how can I pivot my interest in mathematics and make it make sense in terms of here's how I can build my knowledge in a different light. So then I was interested in a very technical investment focused role because I thought, okay, here's how you can apply mathematics to the real world rather than just doing mathematics for a flashy traditional degree on my CV.
Yeah, 100%. That's really interesting to hear, actually. And a slight pivot in questions now. So when you were younger, even potentially younger than A levels, did you have an idea of what you wanted to be when you were older?
No idea. I know I sound so focused at A level point, but before that, it actually hit home because I went back to my home country in December. I went back to Zimbabwe. And when speaking with my auntie, she was like, you know what? We would have been perfectly happy if you were air stewardess because we genuinely had no idea where you were heading. So just for like a bit more background on me, I am very multi-talented as a kid. So I did everything from athletics to music to a lot of other things. I actually almost went to do Olympics professionally. So in the end, I decided it wouldn't go my way in terms of how my dad wanted me to finish off my studies. So I had no idea, to be perfectly honest. And I was this close to almost going to dance college instead of doing college and the traditional A levels. So yeah, it was very much up in the air for a while. But I had a lot of back and forth with my family on that. So in the end, I made my decision.
Yeah, I want to just touch on that. So you didn't know exactly where you were headed, but you were a very talented child, weren't you? But when did you actually start thinking of finance? Was it a specific moment? Was it specific work experience? Was it family? What was the thing that really drove you towards, oh, finance is for me, or I'll try it out, rather than the dance college or whatever?
Yeah, I think it was getting a grasp of realistically growing up as an adult, what my life would look like. Because my dad is a very wise man, and I respect him for all his wisdom. However, at the time, it was very much a dance college. Wake up. Where are you going to be able to afford your rent, etc., etc.? How are you going to build out your career to be financially robust and make sure you can survive in the general sense? So then I started really thinking about things. I started Google researching a lot of different career paths, looking at the pay, looking at what life could look like if I was to stay in a certain area compared to others. So my dad then actually, without him realizing, and I haven't told him this, but he actually kickstarted my research brain. So I started doing a lot of in-depth research on universities, courses, job prospects, different job roles, and I actually did a lot of quizzes so I could understand myself and where I ticked in terms of what makes me tick if I was to look at what profession works for me. So I did a lot of that.
Wow, that's amazing. And it's kind of very similar to me, about how my parents kind of kickstarted my sort of journey, and one of my uncles as well. But kind of moving on a little bit to your start in finance now. So you've covered kind of your educational background, but moving on to when you started university, how was it going to such a specialized financial university? Was a sort of similar mindset? Was that something that really kind of spurred you on, especially graduating in the pandemic as well? How did all of that kind of affect your trajectory into finance?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And to be honest, obviously my eyes were so alive when I arrived in the city. The university's location is second to none because you're literally in the middle of the financial district in between Bank and Canary Wharf. So you can't not bump into a bank or two while studying. So yeah, it was really like enlightening. what I used to do during university as well is the first and second year I did a lot of part-time work. And I remember, this is very much not part of my CV, but it's very integral to where I'm at now. So I actually was working at a Subway, just off the corner off of Berkeley Street. And I had two guys come in and they told me that they work in the asset management business. And the whole spiel of the interaction was, don't go to asset management. It's so boring. You're just going to go with the flow type of career. It's going to be a linear career, but it's going to be quite tiresome. Stick to your passion, stay in the arts, which was already too late, right? Because I'm already on the, year and a half point of my degree at that time. So I was like, how am I going to leave my finance course and then go against all the decisions and research I made into, what I was interested in the end, I started going to a lot of industry-led events. It wasn't your typical student. I actually was very shy in first year, and then my dad introduced me to this interbank event on investing into our home country, and then I started talking to some of the bankers there, and I was like, you know what? It's a lot more than just banking. It's a lot more than just doing the day to day and having an impact through your work. So I was like really enlightened by that. Started to build out some role models that I met that day, and it actually put me through to other people. So then the university was a great launchpad for that because they host a lot of events with professionals. And I met the director of ING at the time. We were doing like a dinner event, and this just goes to show you never know who you're in the same room, let alone the same table as. He was really, really interesting, this guy. He was like, you know what? While I'm, in a senior role at a massive investment bank, I actually DJ on the weekends. And then we started talking about music and our love for music. So, you never know who you can talk to, and you don't need to be too intimidated to start that conversation, is what started to click into my mind. So I was like, you know what? Let me just speak to a lot more professionals because they're humans at the end of the day. They're not going to, if they do brush me off, that's fine. There'll be another professional that might be more willing to have a conversation. So at that same dinner table, I then met another guy from Nationwide who was looking at their strategic sustainable finance policy. And he was like, we actually have an ESG hackathon event happening soon. I was like, what is that? And introduced me to ESG, which I didn't know I'd be interested in. And they invited me as the only student there, which was a big fish out of the, pond, because everyone there was senior in like banks like Invesco, providers like Morningstar. And I'm like, why would they invite me? So that was really interesting. But then it led to my dissertation. So my biggest thing that I took away from being at the university was no opportunity is too small. And if there is an opportunity, always go for it because you have minimal to lose from seeking out that opportunity. So I'm not sure if that answered the question. I went off on a bit of a tangent, but yeah, that was kind of the gist of like getting to know the professionals and seeing whether asset management would or would not be for me.
Yeah, I love everything you said there. That was brilliant, like brilliant overview. It's quite a lot, but especially when coming from a first year, like the nerves kicking in when you're attending events. I'm sure
Yeah.
you felt the same
Yeah,
way.
100%.
Like your first couple of events, you're like nervous, but then you're right. They're only humans at the end of the day, right? And if they brush you off, there's always more people that are nice and willing, like yourself. But yeah, no, 100%. Like, but aside from like networking on that level, were there any internships, work experiences that interested you, that you attended, that you applied to? I know we've just been through an application cycle, so yeah, just talk me through that.
Of course, and to be honest, it's a great point you mentioned about application cycle because in my first year, they weren't really a thing. So to go for a Spring Insight Week, you didn't really need to apply. So I went to loads actually, and it's still new to me that having to apply to get insight is a thing because I think that's actually it. it makes a lot of sense now because the interest is so high in the industry, but it actually just puts up some barriers, which is not ideal. But yeah, so in first year, I went to a lot of Spring Insight events, and I'm sure you guys are aware. For those listening, I was very closely interested in the Amplify Trading guys that were linked to the university, and they were hosting a trading simulator event in Canary Wharf that I attended. That was actually towards my second year. Whereas a lot of the other students, I believe Amplify also offers a different type of internship where you can do it across first and second year, but you do have to pay to benefit from that. Myself, I wasn't interested in paying, to be perfectly honest, because an internship is you get paid. So I was a bit dubious to it all. So I just said, you know what, let me go and follow the traditional path of applying. It was a really rough time, to be perfectly honest with you, because while second year was like 2018, 2019, I feel like COVID really started to play a part in third year in terms of the job market, but the job market was already leaning to a very strained place. So I remember applying to a lot of places, didn't get the opportunities I would have liked. So I was applying to all the typical investment banks, asset managers. I was all over the place. I was aimless in my pursuit, and I burnt for it because once I started speaking to professionals, they were like, you want to make sure your CV and cover letter is very specific to the bank so that they can see that you're invested in applying to them. They can see a clear reason for your interest. And then I remember looking back in third year and I was like, oh my goodness, like my cover letter was the most generic, and actually it didn't display what I wanted it to display to the hiring manager. But it's a journey, to be perfectly honest, to know how to build out your cover letter and let it relay the message. So in second year, having faced all the tough times, getting the in-office internships, I, in the end, went for virtual internships. So there was one hosted by Bright Network, who are an incredible organization. And they had hosts from Goldman Sachs to JP Morgan talking about CV tips and cover letter tips, going through how the market works and stuff like that on a higher level, which really helped. And then discounted cash flow models and stuff. So it was a wide range of stuff in a virtual format because of COVID at the time. So then I, in the end, came away from those. I obviously put the virtual internships on my CV, no shame. And then I went on to actually complete a in the office internship with the university, which I never expected. They actually, I think, me and four other students were the first to be offered the opportunity to intern with the university, and I didn't know what that looked like. My internship, it was basically in business development, which was very different, especially for an educational organization. But in the end, it allowed me to look at the other envelope of finance where they're actually educating the professionals, not just us as students. And then I could see, what is a subject matter expert? What does that mean? How do you resource those people? And actually, my love of LinkedIn really helped me flourish in that internship. And I brought through a lot of business for the university in the north of 3 million plus, just from reaching out on LinkedIn, which a lot of the older generation colleagues were not familiar with because they felt that LinkedIn was more a social media space than a tactical strategy to reach out to, teachers that can build out the courses with them to deliver to professionals. So that was really, really cool and fun. And then coming away from that, I was like, you know what, I don't have, what I should have in terms of internship. I don't have the nice flashy, Morgan Stanley internship or Goldman internship or whichever organization it was. So I felt already on a back foot. But that actually speared my motivation. And I said, you know what? I've been to these industry events. I've got access and insight that others might not have in the same format. So let me play to that in my cover letter and CV. So I really intertwined my uniqueness in that way rather than letting it, make me further shy and further demotivated. So that worked in my favor. and then COVID hit, obviously. So everything just kind of imploded, to be perfectly honest, in terms of the job market. It was very much dog eat dog, to be perfectly honest with you. Because everyone could now access these virtual internships. It wasn't so special to have it on your CV. It wasn't so special to have more publicly accessible resources and information. So I still played true to the insight events I went to and my dissertation, and of course the LIBF internship. And what I learned was it's all about how I can convey how that impacted me and what skill set I bring to the table compared to someone that followed a traditional route. Not that my application was comparing of sorts, but it was just, letting myself shine with what I had to work with, because it is a tough industry to enter, to be perfectly honest. But just kind of going back to a more focused route. So I entered the asset management business during COVID. I found my first role exactly 5 months after graduating, which seems quick, but the whole process of me applying for grad roles was about 20 months. It wasn't instantaneous that I got it. So it was a lot of rejection until that point of getting my first role. So yeah.
Wow, what a journey.
Yeah, insane.
Yeah, and some great advice as
Yeah.
well, 100%. I really hear about kind of when you're applying, especially to your first application cycle, being that's kind of aimless. 100, because I did like 70, 80
Yeah, yeah,
applications
yeah.
and it was across the board. I applied from obviously your big American banks and then your investment banks, but all the way to the, like L'Oreal and P&G and stuff like that. And so it was very, because at the time you just want to get experience anywhere. But it is great advice to be able to spin it saying I've got these sort of experiences, I can bring that sort of knowledge to the sector I want to be in. So using all of that experience and being a finance student and now becoming a finance professional and having that experience for a number of years, how has your view of the industry as a whole changed after actually being part of the sector? Anything you now know about the sector that you wish you knew when you were a student, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, of course. Obviously, I wish I knew COVID was coming so that I knew that my first role, I wouldn't touch an office seat and I wouldn't have my colleagues around me. Jokes aside, though, I think what I feel the industry is at now is a real good place of change and constant change, so that now the banks are noticing that they can't stay complacent and having very dated ways of operating and data technology. Therefore, when I was applying, I wish I had a direct mentor that knew what it took in order to pull together your application, pull together how to do your interview preparation. Because I didn't have that and I didn't have a direct like person in mind that I knew could follow this path well, it was very much trial and error process for me. But then it actually led to me building a very robust interview preparation process and really just like digging through information, like I told you, with like the research I started doing. I applied that in terms of putting together my applications and stuff. What I wish I knew was the interview preparation side is how to not repeat the same thing through multiple interview stages, because there's about 4 or 5 typically for interview stages. So the best example I have for this was actually I did apply for a graduate role at my current company. I didn't get it, but I went through to the final stage. So the first stage was 20 question video, pre-recorded video interview. Then you had a HR call, and then you're invited to the assessment center in person. The assessment center is a blend of doing a group task, trying to strategically look better than the other candidates, but also look like a team player at the same time, which is quite a unique blend to try and prepare for. And then once you pass that, you get the final stage interview. So in terms of that, I think I wish I'd known how to build out some preparation for each stage, so that I knew, okay, if this type of situation comes up, I can be prepared. But you can never be too prepared for interviews. But I wish I just knew that there was a different flavor for each stage in the first place, not to just take it as it comes, but have a little bit more of a prepared stance and ready. And then the second thing I wish I knew, of course, was office etiquette, because my very first office role was a Vanguard, which is a big name. And at the time, I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I'm in a monster American company and I've never been in an office before. And then building out my personal brand and how to introduce myself in the lift to the COO of the company. So that was very new for me. So I wish I had a mentor that could have guided me through that. But what I did have as well, just to give context, was I was very key and interested in business whilst I was studying. And I actually ended up building a business concept in second year, and I was pitching to investors. So already I had that pitch type mentality in my mind. So I just brought that into the workplace a bit. So this is why I mentioned, like, though you don't have the traditional experience, you can still pivot and shift what you've experienced in the past and apply it to the real world. So then that's what I did. It was a lot of different. They call it seed funding stages. So I was doing that for the concept I had at the time. So it really allowed me to know how to communicate with different audiences, because the idea I had was very female focused, but a lot of the time investors are male. What was the kind of environment I was at? So a lot of the investors I would be pitching to were male, not using the product I was having as a concept. So to try and relay the powerful impact that the product had to an audience that didn't relate to using it was something I had to learn quick, which then helped me to being in a multicultural office, speaking to people from all parts of the world, different cultures, being sensitive to that and other bits. So, yeah, it was quite a big jump.
Yeah, I find that really interesting how you mentioned having a mentor and you wish you had it. I mean, I feel like there's only so much you know about yourself and there's only so much mistakes. There's obviously you'll always want in hindsight someone to guide you, and it's nice that you did have that experience, first-hand experience. Oh, this is not what to do, this is what to do. These are the things, because it builds you as a person, right? The only way you're going to learn is if you make mistakes, and like we talked about in previous episodes, it's quite interesting. But has there anything that has specifically discouraged you from entering finance, such as the hours, the hours, personal,
The work-life balance.
work-life balance,
Yeah.
exactly. So,
Yeah, it's a big question because there were many hurdles that made me have a point of reflection at times, saying, obviously not getting the internship was the biggest point of reflection. I was like, you know what, maybe there's just no space for me and what I'm interested in to enter this industry. Maybe I need to think back and consider other paths. So what I had to realize at that point was, you know what, it's all well and good that I've applied and I'm showing my interest, but there's a lot more to it. So, like you mentioned, the hours, there's a very big difference in hours between the sell side and the buy side of investments, to be perfectly honest. In terms of that, I I would look at the salary and be like, oh, you know what, 200,000 paycheck looks really nice, and then on top of that, you're working realistically 16 hours. I was like, I prefer to balance that out a bit better in terms of having the time away from work. Another thing, to be perfectly honest, and it's no reflection on yourselves and my cohorts who are now in the industry, but studying at the university looked quite different for my year. So I was one out of five girls in my whole year, even in the building at one point. So that was quite different in terms of being in the classroom, feeling like I could have my voice heard if I felt confident enough to say something that I knew about. Because a lot of the time it would be like, okay, Sammy, you said that. Let's just fact check with this guy. And I was like, okay, you don't believe what I'm telling you, or you might see my knowledge in a different way because I'm not the typical looking finance bro, to be perfectly honest, is what I had to come across a lot of the time. In terms of cultural wise, I have a Chinese surname, so interviewing was quite challenging as well because I would get the obvious reaction of, "Oh, okay, hi Samantha, nice to meet you," because they expect me to be Chinese. So that was a bit of like, "Come on, guys, anyone can have a name. A name's not going to show you who I am," but there's obvious biases, so that's a big nuance to interviewing. And to be honest, it was kind of a reflection point again of like, am I going to be accepted in a room because of my name? It starts to then build out a little bit of insecurity in ways. So that was a big thing. But then what I started to realize was, you know what, there's the biases, but you can actually build out the interaction and build that rapport to then divert away from that focus and keep the person you're speaking to understanding that it's you at the end of the day, and they're getting to know you, not getting to know what they thought of you on paper, which is a big thing. So a lot of the time in interviews, I would be nervous at first, but once I started to realize it's just an interaction 101, I would just like I'm talking to you guys, I would just play out like a conversation, then question answer. And then in the end, a lot of the time I noticed I would go off on a tangent with the interview because we'll be talking about our personal life and like our hobbies, and then we'll go back to the question again. So in the end, it seemed like I was distracted, but it actually led to them remembering me for a certain thing. And when I went on to further conversations, they would be like, "Oh, we heard this from the other interviewer that you're interested in this. We actually really like that." So in the end, I remember I was telling Bloomberg about my business idea at the time that I had in second year, and I went off on a bit of a tangent. That did play a detriment to my interviewing at the time because I got so distracted that I got away from focusing on the fact that I want to enter a company and enter the industry. They felt at the time that I wanted to spin off and do my own business and just learn entrepreneurship skills only, whereas that wasn't my focus, but it distracted my focus. So for them, it didn't look like I was invested when interviewing. So at least they gave feedback. That's one thing I always seek from wherever I go is feedback a lot of the time. I'm sure you guys met Nadeem before he left. I would go to town. I'd be like, "Nadeem, be as horrible as you can in your feedback. I need it all because no one else is going to tell me, to be perfectly honest." And he'll be like, "Right, let's rip apart your cover letter. Let's rip apart your CV. This doesn't make sense. I'm rewriting this paragraph." I'm like, "Yes, please," so that I can get a different perspective. Though I'll be humbled in the moment. I'll be like, "Oh, okay. I thought that was great. I thought that was like A star." But yeah, it gave me the perspective I needed in the right format in the end.
Yeah, in the long run, you've got to have the ability to open yourself up to people who know more and
Yeah,
be like,
100%.
have that.
Constructive
Yeah,
criticism
exactly.
is vital, especially in
100%.
this industry.
Because some people don't take it well, and that's not how you grow.
Yeah.
I'm glad you touched on your current field a little bit because we really want to delve into asset management now for our listeners who are still thinking about those divisions. So for yourself, we touched on the sort of various little tids and bits now and then what made you choose asset management, but what's making you stay in asset management right now? What are the things that you love about the field that are making you not kind of diversify and maybe jump into a different section?
I think the biggest thing is just like, I feel like asset management has and continues to have the capability to take on change in the most rapid pace, because once something changes in terms of, oh, climate change is now becoming a concern, or there's different things happening in the technology industry and different trends, as soon as that change happens, an investor's appetite changes and they're like, "Actually, let me switch around my investments and really reconsider." So then, of course, the asset managers need to keep pace with that and keep pace with what the investors need, but not only the investors and what they need, but the regulators too. Because when these changes happen, they have to regulate a certain part of how businesses operate and how investments are, put together and evaluated. So with that constant change in pace, I really am interested in staying in asset management because now you've got more appetite to build out these models that can capture, real world change, which you're like, oh, okay, but why should that matter for asset management? But then on top of it, you have the models, plus you have the strategies in place, and you get constant moves in terms of, oh, what happened with Credit Suisse and UBS, for example, and things like that. So the landscape of the market is constantly changing. And now, when I'm in my current role, I can see the pace of change and where certain solutions are lacking, but also they're over advanced for what they're trying to do. And then speaking with the asset managers on a daily basis, it really allows me to relate to them because I used to be in the asset managers themselves. So I think I have a unique perspective to give to the asset managers when I'm, explaining the technology solution they're using, and then going forward what the future will look like. And I am always in constant conversation with people around me. My team does not look like this typical setup. I've literally got this guy that literally used to work at Lehman Brothers that sits right next to me, and his experiences of the industry is so different, right? And we're always talking about what that lifestyle looked like, but not only lifestyle, but what the landscape looked like, and just how much lack of information there was around for people compared to today, where people are overinformed and can actually question the asset manager on their decisions, compared to back in global financial crisis days, where people weren't in the know and therefore was suffering the impact of decisions made by asset managers, but also not having a voice and right to be heard by the asset manager compared to nowadays. So there's so much change, and my career's never going to look one way. I remember when I was actually in my interview process for my current role, and it was very much a, oh, okay, I see you've had quite a bit of experience. So just for context, before I go into how the conversation played out, I had my first role at Santander Asset Management as a risk analyst. I stayed there for a bit of time, but it wasn't the longest time. However, I got a lot of experience and hands-on knowledge that you probably typically need 5 years for, but I got it in the stretch of just under a year. And then I moved on to Vanguard, where I went into client services. And then again, because I'm in client services, all the client questions will teach me what I need to know. So again, it was a wide breadth, but I was only there for a year and a half or so. So that it started the conversation of, what do you want your career to look like? Because you've now left the asset manager and you're going to a tech provider. So are you quite traditional? Because the asset management business has a very linear trajectory. You go start off as an analyst, get senior, get subject matter expertise and become a specialist and become a portfolio manager. That's the usual stretch of an asset management career. Whereas I did a little bit of this and then this and then this. So I, left university, got the investment risk experience, did a little bit of a corner turn to go to client services, and I'm in a senior role. So my careers looked very different. You can get that in any industry, but I feel like asset management has such a low barrier to entry that as long as you have the know-how in a certain area, doesn't always have to be technical and mathematical, or it doesn't always have to be portfolio management and trading focused. As long as you have some technical know-how and you've got the passion, as long as you are aware of the opportunities out there in the different divisions, there's no telling you that you can't go around and move around in different ways. So that's what I really enjoy about the industry the most.
Yeah, I guess, well, to sum up what you said, you've just said that everything isn't as streamlined as you think it is. It's always changing. It's like this whole jigsaw. You can go from here to there to anywhere, and especially from your day-to-day roles, right? And yeah, that's quite interesting. I feel like that's something everyone should know before they enter the space, that it's not your typical, how it's stereotyped, oh, I'm in an office just sitting there doing trades, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm the same. That's what I thought. Oh, you just enter an office and
Yeah.
you just trading at the desk. But for someone that's looking to enter asset management as a space, what would be the most important things they should know about. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think the key thing is where you're starting off in asset management, be understanding of the skill set to get started in that role, and be that skill set can allow you to tap into the questions you ask when you get the opportunity to be sat next to the people in the business. What I mean by that is, for example, the skill set in investment risk is very different to a portfolio manager. They're intertwined and they work very closely together. But portfolio manager is going to rely on the investment risk team to build out the programs and the coded languages that are going to produce the analytics for them. And then what the role of the investment risk team to do is build a story for that, relate to the portfolio manager, and let it influence their decisions with back tested information. So the skill set, therefore, is going to be like, okay, a PM needs to get to the point very straight away. They need to have an understanding and pick up complex concepts that are broken down very quickly and easily through reports, through different formats. So, effective reading and effective comprehension is key. And then, on top of it, being able to strategize on a holistic level, not just the nitty gritty day to day, is very key for a portfolio manager because they have to keep up to pace with not only what the investment risk team are doing, what are the regulators doing? Okay, they now need to sign up for the sustainable finance, responsible investing framework. What does that look like? They then have to go to their traders and be like, you know what, with all of this in mind, we need to make sure we have certain limits and restraints. Whereas the investment risk team are just focused on their risk side, but the risk side is so vast again. So then having knowledge on what type of risk exists, how to analyze that, what are the typical models. Okay, then you've got the models in the context. I should understand how to automate this output. So to automate that, typically you rely on Excel VBA programs to build out larger tools. So the skill sets are very varied depending on the role and division as well. So understanding and tapping into that is key. And then another thing I would say is you can never know everything because things are changing constantly. So then to seek out information online, there's so much out there. Investment Week magazine is incredible for this to keep up to pace with the asset management industry and what's going on. Another key resource would be finance. Finimize, sorry. So this is a big financial news provider, but they break things down in a quite a funky way. They'll give you a little GIF on the top of your financial news, three key takeaways. So there's so much information resource out there to get knowledge. Corporate Finance Institute, of course, for the students and getting the referencing, but also for actual practical use. I rely on Corporate Finance Institute on a daily basis because there are certain concepts that you have to keep refreshing on. The learning doesn't stop. So that's one key thing I have to relay as a message is whichever part of the industry you want to go to, learning never stops. And that actually ties in with where you mentioned earlier on being able to accept the constructive criticism piece. If you cannot take on constructive criticism, you're blocking yourself from key perspectives and being able to grow professionally. On top of that, you feel like you're complacent and that you know everything, and that makes you therefore complacent to keep up to pace with change. So eventually you might notice that you have less to work on or less to give to the industry, and it might have less to give to you because you're not open to that. So that's one key thing I would say.
Wow, yeah. I think for our listeners and for myself as well, I'm actually looking to get into asset management. I mentioned in a previous episode how I flipped from sell side to buy side so quickly. But that's kind of how weird it is at this kind of stage as a student. You don't know exactly what you want to get into. So you should keep your options open. So you've given us a great insight into the field, but we'd love to get an insight into your current role now. Forgive the sort of stupid questions. That's what the podcast is about. But just quickly, what is the sort of purpose of your work? So what are the results you're looking for? What do you go in thinking I've got to get this done today? So what's the full-on purpose?
Yeah. So I'll go into the day to day and then I'll end with the bigger purpose and, the vision. So my day never looks the same. I know a lot of professionals say that and it might sound corny, but it literally doesn't. And my role literally has me learning something every split second of the day. I look at a question, I blink for 2 seconds and I'm like, right, here's what I know, here's what I need to know, and I get back to the client. So, how my role looks, I'm a senior portfolio risk and analytics specialist. What that looks like is I know the tech solution and I have the context of how the asset managers use it. So, I speak to asset managers on a daily basis throughout the day, from analyst all the way up to COO. Whatever they need, I'm there to explain how the tech solution can help them produce their work and how they can interact with it in order to get what they need from it. So there's such a wide variety of solutions that I cover. In terms of that, I'll start my day by going through any urgent issues because there are outages because we're a tech provider. So I then have to go into, okay, is there any urgent issues that I need to get back to? Because a lot of the time I do have to manage expectations of the client, therefore their account manager, their salesperson, because the salesperson is of course trying to manage that relationship. So and then I have to manage the engineers who are the ones trying to investigate everything. So a lot of the time, it's keeping in touch with stakeholders to get the resolution out to the client for any urgent issues. For the greater, bigger picture, I then have longer term projects I work on. So this will be okay, we've got the solution. How can we build it into a rounded solution and give it context? Is there something that we can, you know, further elaborate this solution towards and then give greater, usability to the clients? Because there's no one way to look at analytics, there's no one way to produce it. So it's always thinking about, okay, they're now thinking of this new regulatory requirement. How are we going to shift how we give them that information and display it? How can we then train the clients to get used to this new output and this new expectation on their shoulders that they have to bear? And how can we make it as easy as possible for them to interact with the technology and get that solution out? So yeah, that's the bigger picture. In terms of where I'm at now in my role, I tend to get very in the middle of, oh, I totally understand why the asset managers are asking this question, and I get why they're a little bit like frustrated or confused, or they have their set ways and the other way looks very different for them. So getting them exposed to that, I understand their perspective, but I also have to understand what we can provide for them, stick within those lines and manage expectations, but also be able to monitor at which point can we then stretch that, and I can give feedback to the relevant stakeholders to say, you know what, there's this growing appetite for a certain thing. How could we think about that? And I don't always have to stay in the reactive space. We can be proactive in terms of how we reach out and build up future solutions. So there's a lot to it.
Yeah, your job seems like really team focused, right? You're working with so many people. You need to make sure everything's in check, as you mentioned, the stakeholders. Um, I just wondered, is there a specific project you are most proud of, like that you would say to a future interviewer, "Oh, I'm really proud of so and so."
Yeah, to be fair, it's hard to sit down with myself and actually be like, you know what, that was really cool, because there's always cool things going on that it's really hard. Also, therefore, because I'm in a senior team, it's hard to know who can stand out against one another. But what I will say is the moments that I'm most proud of is when I can go to my team members and be like, you know what, we've got this problem. Let's actually put our heads together and get out a key thing. So recently, there was a issue where the data wasn't easy to interpret, and I was like, I can't get the same issue on my end. So then I had to speak a lot with this very senior product person that built the product rather than anyone else in my team directly. And now from that, I have built key rapport with key business decision makers that are changing how analytics look in terms of the solution we're providing. So that was key because now I'm now the subject matter expert within my team for that focused side. And I now have key rapport with a stakeholder that other people in my team actually thought was impossible to reach out to because he would typically take 5 business days minimum to get back to them. And now I get a response within 5 minutes because that's just how, from one key problem, you can build out rapport with certain stakeholders and make it better and more effective going forward. So I'll say I'm really proud of where I've got to with that because now I'm considering and sitting down with my manager on, oh, you know what, we've got this. How can we knowledge share with the team? How can I go to clients and be proactive in pursuing what they need from this solution? And now I'm producing and I've got projects for that solution that other people do not. And it's not a competitive point because everyone has their own focus in my team, which is a beautiful thing because it's really nice to know that we're all working towards the same thing, but we're all focused in different sections and segments of the same orange. I know that sounds really corny, but that's the best way I can like display an imagery of how our team works.
Wow. Yeah. That's actually really insightful. As you mentioned as well, just working in the team, it's nice to kind of have people that rely on you, but then vice versa, you're
Yeah.
relying on them as well. But then I'm imagining there must be times at work where you do feel challenged, especially in such a senior role. So have there been times where you've been stressed? If so, why? And how do you handle it as a professional? I mean, stress for us, we handle it in a different way. We'll probably jump on PlayStation or something and detox like that. But for yourself, how do you handle stress?
Oh, you know what? I have my own PlayStation of sorts in the office of how to do that. So, a lot of the time, stress comes from an unexpected urgency from the client. And when the client says urgent, it's really hard to know how urgent because something could be urgent and then you're chasing them and they're not getting back to you. Or it could be they're chasing you every second and then before you know it, the COO is involved and talking to the head of sales and you're like, okay, this is stressful. In terms of that, I think it's being pragmatic enough to say, okay, this is an urgent issue. What can I do to expedite things? If I can't expedite things, let me manage their expectations. And therefore, I have different ways of communicating where I'm at. I'm very transparent. That's my key, like, compass. I'm very transparent with whoever I talk to, whichever stakeholder it is. I'm very clear in what I'm doing now, what happened before, and where we're going to go towards the resolution. Because all I've seen in most instances is the point at which things get worse is when there's lack of key communication and just being on the same page at all times. So I like to do that with every stakeholder I talk to. In order in points that I feel overwhelmed with stress, I know to take myself away from my desk, to be perfectly honest, because there are points where on a certain day or a given point I feel like I'm at a dead end, or I feel like I'm not going to get anywhere in the current mindset and fog I'm feeling. So luckily, we do have spaces in my office where we can get away from the desk, take a breather, take a nap if you need to. I have no shame in telling people that. You do have to have tactful breaks. You know what? I also realized last year that I wasn't getting as much fresh air as I needed to in a day. So I'd end up having dizzy spells because I was in the building the whole day without getting fresh air, which you think is fundamental, right? But it's so easy to stay at the desk and it's so easy to not go outside because there's too many things going on. But I've now realized, and what I've started doing for myself is I'll schedule out an hour in the day, apart from lunch, where I'll take a breather, I'll set up a meeting with someone from a different division, or I'll just go outside for fresh air, go for a walk, come back. A lot of the time nowadays as well, I've actually been very fortunate to have a lot of friends professionally that I can have very honest conversations on mental health about, and we go into deep conversation on how we manage stress, because I like to get different perspectives, as you've realized. So I talk to other people on how they manage stress too.
I like a lot what you've just said, like especially regarding mental health. It's very serious, especially we know since COVID being indoors, and it's just been more apparent recently. Like it's been such a priority for everyone. It's very interesting that you do need to have professional people that you can speak to about your mental health and how you cope with it. But yeah, anyways, we're starting to hit the tail end of the episode. We just want you've covered everything. I'm pretty sure.
So succinctly as
Yeah,
well.
exactly. We just want to touch on your future in finance. So, is there any final tips you'd like to give to our viewers who are at the stage of deciding of where they want to go, or if they want to go into finance at all? Any final suggestions, tips from your own self?
Yeah, of course. I feel like there's so many, but I will stick to the key. I like to always go down and break it down into three. So the first one being research as much as you can. When you're interview prepping, research the company on all type of platforms, their website, their LinkedIn, their Glassdoor, Fishbowl, any resource that you can access to understand how the company projects their message, and then you can kind of adopt that message into your wording. That's what I like to do, so that I show and I genuinely show my interest. Another thing would be always seek out opportunities. So, a lot of the time, you can get access to things like Investment 2020, Bright Network, different ways to access experiences that you might not otherwise be aware of. They do everything from hosting internships to traineeships. So, traineeship is in between an apprenticeship and a full time role. You now have degree apprenticeships as well. So, there's that out there as well. So always seek out opportunities professionally, but also just generally. There's a lot of events that you can go to within my office, but also outside, where they do thematic events such as what's going on in the carbon footprint space, what's going on with Russia, Ukraine, etc. Whichever parts of things you're interested in, whether that's news or technical analysis, there's always opportunities to be sought out. The third advice I would give is LinkedIn is going to be a great resource. I feel like I'm like unofficially one of the advocates. I'm not, and I'm not paid to say this, but LinkedIn has done me so well as a student, and even more so as a professional. So now, if I have certain things that I'm interested in, or I am not clear on what certain parts of the market look like, I'll just speak to an analyst in that part of the market. And actually, I made friends with someone in my current office before I joined the company, and now we've got that rapport, even though it wasn't a friendship beforehand, it was just a tactful professional reach out. But now we're closer because that was the only person I knew before I started meeting everyone in the office. So that would be my third point as well. But one last one. Sorry. in terms of in terms of rounding all of those three together, just be sure on who you are. And if you're not sure now, which is completely valid, you're going to be in your early stages of university, use your career advisor as much as you can. Or if you don't like speaking to people, try and get to know yourself through quizzing yourself, like I mentioned earlier. So just get to know you and do what feels right for you at the stage you're at.
Samantha, thank you so much. Those are
So much.
especially just in that last 5 minutes, I've learned so much. I'm definitely going to be coming back,
Definitely,
watching this
100%.
episode, taking some notes. But I just would like to thank yourself for coming on. I mean, it's definitely our best episode by
Yeah.
far, but also for episode 10 as well. And alongside that, I'd love to thank our listeners and viewers for staying with us for this long. We only launched in February, and we're doing really well on all platforms, and we're not stopping anytime soon. We're going to be the next milestone's episode 20. That's the next one. But again, Samantha, thank you so much for coming on and providing insights into your field, your role, and just your journey and all the other tips. For our next episode, episode 11, again, we're coming back next week. Next Sunday, we'll be back. We've got two non-finance students in their second year from Imperial College London. I myself met them at my UBS internship, and they're going to come on and talk about how they feel going into finance from a non-finance background, how that's affected how they approach events and other internships. But other than that, as usual, please, if you are watching on YouTube or listening to us on an audio platform, please be sure to like, follow, and subscribe with the notification bell on, and follow us on all our socials, and please do engage with us on those as well. Thank you again. See you next week, and stay tuned.